The body of the Mini Cooper R56 is covered with a high-quality paintwork that resists chips and scratches well, but miracles do not happen and these minor damages do appear on it over time. The front part of the body, the hood and the edge of the windshield, is most quickly covered with chips. There are no significant complaints about the corrosion resistance of the external body panels. If the elimination of chips was not delayed, there should not be any problems. But in hidden parts and on the bottom of the car, rust can still be present. In the lower part of the car, the elements of the chassis, subframe and the exhaust system are most prone to corrosion. In cars of the first years of production, small pockets of rust can be found in the drainage holes of the body and under the hood. The oil pipeline and antifreeze drain pipes, the dipstick bracket, the power fuse box, the battery terminals, etc. are oxidized. The chrome coating of decorative elements also causes problems. It painfully endures winter operation. Due to the low ground clearance, the skirt of the front bumper often suffers, and the bumpers themselves are often broken by careless drivers on a high carb or snow drift. There are also complaints about the wear resistance of the windshield and the protective plastic of the front optics. They quickly override. Also, the owners note a tendency to souring of the wiper trapezoid and the window regulator rail. Restyling cars were equipped with gasoline atmospheric force of the Prince series, developed jointly with the French concern PSA and 12B14 1.4 98 horsepower and named 12B16 1.6 120 horsepower. After restyling, they were replaced by a 1.6-liter and 16B16 unit 122 horsepower with a modified design. For the Cooper S, a 1.6-liter and 14B16 turbo engine 175 horsepower was provided, which in 2010 gave way to the N18B16 engine 184 and 211 horsepower. There are also diesel versions of cars with a 1.6-liter engine 110 horsepower in the secondary market. In the time in drive, all engines use a metal chain, which for cars manufactured before 2010 had to be changed at the first 50,000 kilometers of run due to strong stretching. In more recent versions, the chain can last up to 120,000 kilometers, but its tensioner can fail. Symptoms of chain stretching: speed flows on an uneven engine. When stopped, it can drop to 300–400. Dynamics decreases, jerks appear during acceleration, extraneous sounds are heard when the speed increases in neutral gear. Another of the mass problems is a tendency to cocking of the intake, throttle and piston group, especially for turbo motors, which leads to hanging valves and increase in oil consumption. It is worth noting that even a slight decrease in the level of lubricant in the motor negatively affects the time and drive resource, the performance of the variable valve timing system and the state of the engine as a whole. To avoid problems, it is recommended to use only original oil, as well as to decarbonize the intake and clean the intake manifold at least once every 80,000 kilometers. When the oil separator is cocked, it will have to be changed along with the cylinder head cover. The cost of the original is about $350. A lot of trouble can also be delivered by the engine cooling system, which does not always cope with its tasks due to the high operation temperature of the units, 115 degrees, especially for charged versions of the car. The situation is aggravated by a not very reliable thermostat with a complex plastic case. It serves 40–60,000 kilometers. At the moment, the manufacturer is selling a more reliable part that can last up to 100,000 kilometers. It should be noted that the high temperature of the engine adversely affects the life of the system pipes, seals, gaskets, thermostat, additional electric pump and radiator, and any overheating is fraught with the appearance of oil burn and intensive wear of the piston group. To prolong the life of the internal combustion engine, it must be serviced every 8–10,000 kilometers, improve crankcase ventilation and lower the temperature control. Among other shortcomings, one can single out a modest resource of engine mounts, a catalyst of resource of up to 100–150,000 kilometers, ignition modules, a second lambda probe and a temperature sensor. In case of incorrect operation, the wrong mixture is supplied to the motor, which makes it difficult to start. Separately, it is worth highlighting the generator, in which, due to an unsuccessful location, brushes and bearings wear out quickly. When replacing, many prefer parts from Peugeot or Citroën, as its price is much lower than the original. On cars of the first years of production, failures of the Vanos clutch and the phase shifter control valve were often encountered. To eliminate most of the problems during production, the manufacturer repeatedly upgraded the cylinder block, cylinder head and piston group, but it was not possible to completely get rid of early failure of internal combustion engine parts. For cars with turbo engines, the high-pressure fuel pump adds a headache, the replacement of which costs about $1,000. The wear of the pump is accelerated by the regular use of low-quality fuel with a small amount of lubricating additives. Pump failure is manifested by problem with starting a cold engine and sluggish acceleration. Also, the weak points of the engine with the turbine include the pipe clamps, often fly off, and the turbine oil line, rust. The resource of the piston group of atmospheric units with proper maintenance and elimination of problem areas will be about 300,000 kilometers, for turbocharged ones 200–250,000 kilometers. Cars running on heavy fuel were not officially delivered to us, but were brought from Europe by great dealers and, as a rule, have impressive mileage. Most of all, in this engine, the timing chain bothers, serves no more than 100,000 km, and fuel equipment, injectors and high-pressure fuel pumps. Also, in our realities, the EGR recirculation valve and the particulate filter are given up quite early. Of the more significant problems, the unreliability of the swirl flaps in the intake manifold is noted. They quickly overgrown with soot, jam, and the crankshaft damper often needs to be replaced without having served even 100,000 km. Like gasoline engines, there are complaints about the performance of the cooling system, although in this engine, working with high temperatures leads to cracks between the cylinders. Transmission. Only two types of transmissions were available for this model, a 6-speed Getrag 285 manual as well as ASIN TF61SN and TF-60SN automatic transmission with the same number of gears. Mechanics with timely maintenance can do without repair up to 200,000 kilometers. After, the synchronizers become unusable. Of the weak points, it is worth highlighting the dual-mass flywheel. It needs to be replaced after 100,000 kilometers of run. Another disadvantage of the box is the non-so-successful gear selection mechanism, due to which, closer to 150,000 kilometers, the former clarity when switching is reduced. Clutch leaves depends a lot on how you drive. At medium loads, the clutch can withstand 100–150,000 kilometers, but for those who like to beat, it may be asked to be replaced after 30,000 kilometers. The trouble-free operation of automatic transmission depends on the purity of the lubricant and the temperature regime of operation. Since instead of a full-fledged cooling system, a heat exchanger is used here, which eventually clogs and ceases to cope with the cooling of the gearbox, the operating temperature in the box can reach 120 degrees, which reduces its resource. The situation is aggravated by the long oil change interval prescribed by the regulations. As a result, after 100–150,000 kilometers, the transmission needs to be repaired. You can extend the life of the automatic transmission by periodically replacing the heat exchanger. There are services that introduce an additional cooling radiator and frequent lubrication changes. It is recommended to change every 40,000 kilometers, while using Toyota T4 type oil is allowed. If you do not regularly change the lubricant, the wear products of the friction clutches and the lining of the blocking of the gas turbine engine gradually clog the solenoids, the valve body, and the oil pump. As a result of gear shifting, they will be accompanied by jerks. The operation of a transmission with a clogged valve body inevitably leads to expensive repairs of the machine. Oil starvation accelerates the wear of mechanical parts. The weak point of the mechanical part of the machine is the C1, C2 clutch packs and the sun gear bushings. Of the common problems of automatic transmissions and mechanics, one can single out not very reliable CV joints, which often need to be replaced at the first 100,000 km of run. Both axles of the Mini Cooper R56 use independent suspension with a McPherson strut at the front and a multi-link design at the rear. To increase the reliability and comfort of the suspension, which was a lot of criticism in the previous versions, as well as reduce the cost of repairs, the manufacturer has significantly upgraded the chassis. However, this not only did not get rid of all the problems, but also added new ones. So, for example, in this generation, to replace the stabilizer bushings, it is necessary to remove the subframe, which significantly increased the cost of replacing the consumables, resource 30–50,000 kilometers. In addition to the struts and bushings of the stabilizers, the weak points of the suspension include wheel bearings, ball bearings, and silent blocks of levers. They serve about 80,000 kilometers. Shock absorbers with moderate loads are surrendered after 100–120,000 kilometers. The rear axle can do without significant investment up to 80–100,000 kilometers. The steering is equipped with an electric power rack from the Japanese manufacturer Jitect. The mechanism as a whole can be called successful, but some fans blame it for insufficient effort on the steering wheel. When using regular discs, the reel starts knocking at a range of 120–150,000 kilometers, but traces of smudges do not appear until 200,000 kilometers, which is a good indicator. But when using large radius wheels, the rig often does not withstand even 100,000 kilometers of run, since its restoration is relatively inexpensive. Another of the disadvantages of the steering can be noted the tendency to corrosion of its connectors. Original consumables, tips, as a rule, can withstand up to 120,000 kilometers. As for the reliability of the brake system, there are no complaints about it at all. In addition, it is noted that after modernization it has become even more tenacious, more powerful pads and discs are used. To finish the interior of the Mini Cooper R56, high-quality wear-resistant finishing materials are used, which even after many years of operation do not give out the age of the car. Only decorative seals, with time they peel off, and a block of buttons on the steering wheel with active use signs of wear appear already at 100,000 km can be written down to problem areas. The presence of a hatch in the car requires periodic maintenance of the opening-closing mechanism, otherwise, at one fine moment, it may jam in one of the positions. If the hatch has never been serviced during operation, it is not worth doing this anymore, since grease on worn gears often leads to their slippage. Much more problems delivers electrical equipment. Most of all, the climate control bothers with breakdowns, in which, after 100,000 km, the flow distribution dampers hang, and closer to 150,000 km, the stove motor starts to make noise. The FRM comfort module and rear parking sensors often bother, poorly protected from moisture. There are also failures in the multimedia system, and in top-end versions, its screen often fails, strips appear. You can also highlight the weak electric drives of windows and locks. They do not break often, but with the advent of cold weather they begin to fail. Can make nervous and immobilizer. The Mini Cooper R56 is still one of the most driven cars in its class, but unfortunately it cannot boast of impeccable reliability, although we have to admit that there are much fewer weaknesses compared to its predecessors, R50. The best option for purchasing are copies of the last years of production, which have passed all recall campaigns and were regularly serviced in a specialized service. But the purchase of pre-styling cars will most likely be doomed to endless repair costs. If you are the owner of this car model, please describe the problems that you had to face during the operation of the car. Perhaps it is your review that will help readers of our site when choosing a car.